of this, the PhD recording. So, hello, Diane Regan. Thank you so much for joining us today. Diane is here as a retired careers and opportunities teacher from one of the local high schools that I've had the privilege of working with her and being a part of. And I wanted to talk to her today and get her wisdom on the landscape of getting and preparing for college, universities, and even the job part, if that's, you know, if you've got time to dive into that a little bit, but specifically like how community service played a role, and if you've seen any trends on your side that you feel are important to point out. But first, I'd like you to just tell us about you. Give us a little background about you.
Okay, so I am a lifelong, mostly lifelong Freeport resident. Went to high school at Freeport High School, and then lived in Milwaukee and Dubuque and a few other places, and then back to Freeport, where I've now recently retired from. I've got 5 days of retirement under my belt.
Congratulations.
So my most recent position was as the College and Career Center advisor for our high school, with responsibility for all age levels, 9 through 12, and working to provide programming for students to consider the world of college going and career preparation and get them ready for life after high school.
Okay. So what kind of started you on that path to, was this a position that the high school recognized they needed? Had there already been somebody in that role?
So kind of like all career paths. So one of the things that I would like to say to students right now is that your career path is going to go in many, many directions. There's not one.
Yeah.
Right. The misnomer that we tend to think is that people say, well, I'm going to be a nurse. I'm going to be a neonatal nurse. And that's what I'm going to be for my whole life. Well, that's probably not ever going to be true. You might be a nurse, but you might have to start as a geriatric nurse when you thought you were going to be a neonatal. You may, you know, there's a lot of things that are going to come your way, and then you may either discover that neonatal is absolutely the thing along the way, or you might find out that who knows, all kinds of different paths you could end up with because you chose nursing. And
right.
You might even choose nursing and find out you don't want to do that. So paths are different, right? So my path, I decided that I really like kids, and I started in special education, where I learned a lot about preparing for careers, which sounds really interesting, but mostly because it gives purpose to education, right? Like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And it's because you have an adult life you have to get ready for.
Mm-hmm.
And so working with students with special needs made that more apparent. Eventually I went into teaching social studies, and then I happened upon a position completely by accident called Jobs for Illinois Graduates. And that program was focused on seniors who had the ability to graduate, but could find a stumbling block in their senior year. And so what we did was we provided all the support to help them finish their senior year strong, the support they needed to decide on their career path, whether it was college, career, military. And then it followed up on those students for 1 year later, once a month. So every month I was calling and saying, hey, how are you doing this month? What are you doing? Where are you at? And being that adult support system that is often missing for a 19-year-old.
Sure.
And I loved that position. It was directly tied to the state of Illinois budget, and all things 2008 killed that program. And so that position went away. And a few years later, we had a principal who decided we needed a college and career center. And he opened it. I did not get the position the first time, but when that person left for another position, then I was able to take it. So that's where I've been now for the last 5 years.
Okay, wonderful. So as you mentioned, the careers change. It just does. Like I'm with you there. I've had the same experience. How much have you seen and experienced that the volunteering and doing community service helps sway that one way or another?
So over the last several years, probably in 2008, community service was important. And let's say if I go back to my career and I think back to when I started with Jobs for Illinois Graduates in 2004, I think it was. It was important. It wasn't the end all. People were looking at it, but more and more emphasis was being put on community service, more almost as a purist form, right? Like it's the right thing to do. It's the good thing to do. And then adults started saying, well, why aren't our teenagers doing more of this? This would be really good for them. And eventually that morphed into colleges saying, hey, we don't want the people who only go to school. We want those students who are looking to give back to their communities. And in the last 10 years, that has become a major part of the college admissions process, especially if you are looking at selective schools. So if you're looking at a more selective school, you are going to have some community service, and not just, hey, I helped the neighbor lady, which is wonderful. You should absolutely do that. They're looking for you to have created and manned and gone start to finish for a whole project. They want service learning projects to happen, not just, I did this activity over here and this activity over here. More like, I'm going to use a current example from the last couple weeks. I led a march. I took my high school students and we marched through, and this is what we did, and here's the pictures and the videos. That's more what they want, as opposed to, oh, I marched and I carried a sign. So there is a difference.
Right.
What I've really been seeing now through COVID is many campuses saying, you know what, predictors of success now don't have anything to do with standardized testing. That doesn't mean give up on your standardized test yet, but they are really emphasizing the more human parts and the community service stuff.
Right. Well, I know NIU announced a few months ago that they're I believe the term now is test optional. Yep. So they aren't accepting ACT, SAT scores for their 2021 admissions. So yeah, it's very interesting. And you bring up something that I've talked about before in the live streams on Fiveable is the commitment. They want to see a commitment. There's a balance between the number of hours you're doing. They also need to see that commitment. And that's one of the things that the Altruize app helps to track and keep like on the forefront for that student as well. Have you had any experience where you've seen a student do a volunteer opportunity and they said they were going down one path and then they did a volunteer opportunity, or a few of them, and went, because I did it, I am or not?
I want to back up to something you just said, and then I'll tackle that question. You mentioned using Altruize, boy, spit it out for me.
Altruize, yep.
Thank you. Using that app to document what you're doing, that is also very important. They want to see the documentation that you did it. So if you can document it in an app like that, or you can take pictures or videos, they want documentation of you doing it to make sure that it was your project, not everybody else's. So that documentation piece is important. In terms of a specific example for community service, I can't think of one right now, but what I can think of is a young man who went more on like he got invited to do something at the courthouse where they were talking about city planning. And city planning was never on his radar. And it was really about city planning for young people. So it was kind of this weird combination of not an internship, because it was a one-day event, but it was a way to expose young people. And what he told me was he really didn't want to go, but that his parents kind of said, you got to go. This is a great opportunity for you. And they used the phrase, it'll look good on your resume. And it did. It looked great on his resume. And resume building is not wrong. But why you do it might be, right? Like you can put stuff on your resume to just make lists, and lists are not important. Your resume is really more about what I've actually accomplished. Anyway, he got there and was so enthralled with everything he learned about what city planners actually do and how they actually worked and how they were actually important to the benefit of a community. That's probably going to be on his radar, that he is going to completely shift his career path into something more public service.
Yeah, That's awesome. And you bring up a great point too, because I hear pushback from parents and others saying, "Oh, school shouldn't make you do the volunteering. They can't require it. It's volunteering." And I say, you got to think of it more of opening a door, just an opportunity, a way to let students who don't have much life experience yet experience different aspects of the inner workings of something. If they commit, like you suggested, they get involved in a certain project or with a certain nonprofit or whatever, to be able to expose that possibility. So that's a great example of
Yeah,
that.
I think it's really important what you said, in that students, it's just super important to find as many life experience as you can, period. And
Mm-hmm.
right now we've been pretty limited in that, right?
Right.
My limited experience of this COVID thing has me very nervous that we have already forgotten how to talk to each other in person. And actually, now that we've been able to kind of meet a little bit with some of our families where we maybe didn't wear the mask because we were outside, and how awkward people are and not even knowing how to talk to their own family, or should I hug or shouldn't I hug? Well, that's going to impact teenagers, all of you, right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you interacting with people? And so those kinds of community experiences where you actually have to go do that and learn some things and get involved, those are going to be life-changing for you.
Yeah. Good. So as we finish out, I wanted to again get some pearls of wisdom from you. If and maybe you don't have different things that you'd say to each group, but if you had like 3 things that you absolutely needed to convey to a freshman, and then maybe 3 things to a sophomore, 3 things to a junior, what would they be as it pertains to kind of that getting ready for their life outside of high school?
So for freshmen, I would say your top 3. Number 1 is going to be to do well in school. You cannot repair a bad GPA if you start your freshman year at a 1.0. You can never, ever, 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 ever get a 4.0. You can't do it. It's not numerically possible. So if you start that way, you're in trouble. And you don't want to have to fight that as you start growing up and getting more mature. You don't want to have to go, oh man, I screwed up, now what? You don't have to do that. Number 1. Number 2, in whatever classes that you have where you can start investigating careers, it is time to start thinking about, what am I going to be as a grown-up? You don't have to say, I'm going to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon, but you might want to think about, God, medicine sounds interesting. So the big picture ideas. And then the third thing is, this is a hard one, watch your social media presence. Don't say inflammatory things as a freshman. Think before you speak and put it on any social media. You might think things get taken down, but they don't. If you've done it digitally, it's there forever and ever and ever. And if somebody wants to find it, they will find it.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my freshman advice. Sophomores, if you had that first year where you went and you got squirrely and you kind of forgot what to do, your best bet is to start now and get rocking and rolling and get those grades up. It's not that the grade itself is the end all or the reflection of even your intellect, right?
Right.
I've said to a lot of students, your grades should reflect your intellect. So if you're super smart, but you don't like school and you have a 2.0, nobody can ever quantify your intelligence because your GPA isn't there. There's no way to prove to somebody, right?
Right.
You could have really poor grades and a great SAT or ACT score, but then the colleges want to know, like, why?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to explain your high intelligence but lack of motivation for grades? So you want your grades to reflect your intellect. I know that was the long-winded way to say one of those. Sophomores, again, you should be starting to hone in on, maybe now instead of, hey, I'm just interested in medicine, maybe you're thinking, wow, do I want to be a respiratory therapist, or is it going to be more important, like, is occupational therapy? And what is occupational therapy?
Mm-hmm.
So a little more investigating there, getting a little more in depth. third thing, probably now's the time to really get that community service project thought about. What's important to you? What do you find important in your life? Do you care? Like, what is here's a big idea. What's pro-life mean to you? When we hang up, I want you to go home. Just think about that. What's pro-life mean? Does that mean, is that all abortion? Is pro-life have something to do with the current civil unrest? Is pro-life, what is pro-life? Can you be pro-life one kind of life and pro-life not another kind? Can you be a racist but hate abortion? So those are big questions. Where do you stand on that as a sophomore? Because that's how you're going to figure out where you want to go do that community service. Yeah. Juniors, and this is going to be changing, guys. I hate to tell you, but we don't know what's coming your way. None of us do. We're in, everybody's tired of the word uncharted territory, but we're in uncharted territory and nobody knows. So you've got to keep your scores up and you've got to practice for those SATs and those ACTs until colleges really hone in on whether or not they need those. There's a lot of evidence that that does not predict your ability to be successful in college, that your actual predictor is more based on your grades and your community service. Right. So you may see that shift, but until that happens, because we don't know what it's going to be, you can't let that go. And you should still be practicing for whichever test it is that you think you're going to have to take. 2, time to really think about what kind of college you want. Or do you want to go to college? You don't have to go to college. You have to go to college to be highly successful. Some of the people that I know that make the most money never went. So it's really about what do you want now? You've got to start to hone in on that. And then that third thing relates to, so now is the time to start thinking about, all right, I'm going to head towards being a physician, or I'm going to head towards being a CNA. Very valuable positions, both of them, but very different career paths. If you're going to be a physician, then you have to take the right classes right now as a junior. You can't wait to take anatomy. Don't look at me and say, I'm going to be a doctor. Well, have you taken anatomy? No, I hate anatomy. I want my doctors to love anatomy, and you know what? I want them to have straight A's in anatomy. So you got to start thinking about those kinds of things, because you can't backtrack it as you get older. Right. And if you do have to backtrack, it's just 10 times harder. You can do it usually, but it's way hard.
Right. Right. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. That was fun to do. I feel like I'm back at school, even though I'm not.
Well, then we might come back and do another interview at another time. So thank you so
let
much
me know.
for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, thank you.
Good luck on your college quest, everybody.
Thank you.